We're the 6th of April 2023 as I start recording this video, and it's broadly 7 a.m. in the morning, and I've been working, I've been working for a very long time, but I've been producing structured videos about home economics for the past 3 days, so I grant myself the right to slow down a little bit and to produce this kind of garbage where I just talk randomly in front of my camera. I don't know when or if it will be published, but I am preparing my breakfast. I've just produced my own fruit juice, orange juice, to reduce plastic, packaging, wrappings, etc., etc., and it's better. And I am cooking potatoes, onions, and beans, and eggs. And while I cook the breakfast and when I eat, I will talk like I did yesterday. It will be shorter than an hour probably. But I will just share my thoughts. Yeah. And I received this book yesterday. I haven't obviously taken the time to read it. And I've been reading for the past few weeks this book thoroughly and step by step, one might say. And so I will briefly talk about economics. This book explains very well that basically when money is created artificially by banks and by the central bank eventually, because there's the central bank which creates money and then it loans the money or the ability to grant loans to private banks in a way. So when a loan is credited, money comes into the economy, but when you increase the quantity of money in the economy, the amount of money which is already in the economy loses its value because the amount of money is increased, but not the amount of goods and services. So it's like if you have that's orange juice. If you add water, in a way, that would be water would be to orange juice what fiat money is to real money, namely money which exists because it is related to the ability to purchase value of goods and services. If you add liquid water in your orange juice, you do not have more orange juice. You have a more diluted brewage in a way. And then if you sell, if you have 1 liter of orange juice and you add 500 milliliter, you have 1 liter of that's basically like a bottle of water. You have 1 liter of orange juice. If you had half a liter, you have now you have 1.5 liter of liquid. But if you sell 1.5 liter at the price, 1.5 liter of orange juice plus water mixed together at the price of 1.5 liter of real orange juice, you are screwing your customers, because adding water, it adds liquid, and there is water within orange juice in a way, but there is also orange, so if you add just water, fake liquid, like liquidity or fake currency created out of thin air, you debase the current currency. And I try to because that sounds like it's very not very clear, but economics is not my favorite topics, but I try to interpret theoretically nonetheless. So when the quantity of money in the economy is artificially increased by granting loans, creating money out of thin air, or changing the reserve rates, what do you call this? Fractionary reserve, the ability of banks to loan money without backing up with either gold or with real savings, you increase the quantity of money, but not the quantity of goods and services, and then those who receive the money earlier, the big corporations, the big banks, the corrupt politicians on the paycheck, etc., the purchasing power of the newly created money is equal to the currently existing money in circulation, but then it stimulates a growth in demand, because you have new money which hasn't cost anything to create except writing on a computer or printing banknotes. So you can buy goods and services because this newly created money, which is kind of fake, has real purchasing power at the beginning in a way, but then the businesses, the companies, the shopkeepers, the agents in the economy, to match and to adapt to the increased demand created by the increased supply of money, they will have to rise their prices, and this is the consequence of an increase of the monetary supply. Inflation, that's the rise of prices, but it's usually defined as the rise of prices, but actually inflation, from a rigorous economic definition, it's simply the increase of the quantity of money within the economy. The increase in prices is a consequence, namely the sellers, the businesses, they have to adapt, and they increase their prices, and the people who receives the increased quantity of money later in the process, because it's redistributed not by the state and by charities, but redistributed by the very structure of a circulating economic system where money circulates. When the people get the money one way or another, either through wages or through distribution of the state or through exchanges, etc., if they sell themselves, the other economic agents, and they sell their product, they receive money from customers. Once the money gets to the average person, the prices have increased, and therefore the people get screwed up, because the money that they had been saving for years or decades, or their retirement pension, or their salary, which remains stable, it does not adapt mechanistically to the rise of prices. So either they have the same amount of money but prices go up, or they have an increase in wages in case of civil servants, but it does not compensate the rise in prices. So and their savings, if you have $100,000 in the bank, and suddenly the quantity of money in the economy is increased by 20% or 50% because the loans are granted, your $100, they get devalued because there is more money in the economy, but your $100 in the bank account, it's the result of years or decades of savings, of hard work, of thrift. And the banker who creates money out of thin air, for him, creating not $100,000, but creating millions and billions of dollars, it's just writing on the computer screen. So all the savings, they do not disappear, but their value decreases, because it's like the real orange juice versus adding just water. By increasing the quantity of liquid, it does not increase the quantity of orange juice if the new liquid is not real orange juice but just water. Yeah. Real money is supposed to be a sound money, as they call this, is supposed to be a reflection and connected to purchasing ability of real goods and services. And then I will take care of my potatoes first. But I'm not exactly sure, because I'm not an expert in economy. I haven't I've been reading a few books over the past few months, but that's not my favorite topic, although it can be interesting theoretically. But yeah, what I want to say is that I as a personal individual, I started as an economic student in high school. I studied economy. I was not very intelligent back then, but the program which is being taught is Keynesianism, Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, Adam Smith, Keynes, and the neoclassics, etc. Marx a little bit sometimes. And Keynes, basically, his philosophy is not philosophy, it's economic philosophy, consists in saying that you have to allow the state to create money by investing a lot in production, infrastructures, or redistribution. So Keynesianism is a justification of state expenses by borrowing money or by increasing the quantity, the supply of money. And then the logic, the dubious logic of Keynes means, he says, if you increase the quantity of money, it will enable to stimulate economic activity because the state will invest in highly intensive projects in terms of work the requirements, or if the state increases artificially the wages of the civil servants, or the pension, or the unemployment paychecks, etc., it will increase the demand of the population, and therefore the businesses will have to respond to this newly available demand by producing more supply, so it will stimulate economic activity. But it's kind of a twisted, in the negative sense, twisted reasoning, because there is no logical, mechanistic connection between increasing money and increasing economic activity. Sometimes, and most of the time, it's actually detrimental, because here the Austrians are intelligent, because artificially increasing the quantity of money, it destroys the capital structure, because it gives first it disincentivizes people from saving, therefore from creating capital, because if your savings do not vanish, but if they lose their value because the state constantly creates new money, there's no incentive to save. So it has first a moral impact, and it brings about a higher time preference. You think less in terms of long term, the next 20 years, your children, your great children, the next generation. You think about immediate gratification, buying stuff to stimulate the economy. That's really Keynesianism in a nutshell. So there's the first problem of the moral disincentivize of being thrifty. You are incentivized to be irresponsible and to live in the present without thinking long term. But also it wrecks the capital structure, and it sends, here Mr. Byron explains very well, it sends wrong signals to entrepreneurs, because the interest rate, namely the money that you pay to the bank or to the financiers when you borrow money to invest in a project, it is supposed to reflect the availability of capital. And if it's very high, it means it's kind of risky and there is not a lot of capital. And if it's low interest rate, you can afford to borrow more. But it is supposed to reflect the availability of capital, which is supposed to be the result of savings of entrepreneurs or households, the result of thrift and work. But if you artificially create money, you lower down the interest rate because there is more money available, therefore it's less expensive, and it sends wrong signals to entrepreneurs who now believe, the interest rates are being lowered, so we can afford to invest, to take risk, to start new projects. But the signal is distorted, so they will over-invest. That's the boom-bust cycle. So they will over-invest in some projects while thinking that there is a possibility for growth and for profits, and in the short term it might be the case because everyone gets a little bit heated up, but actually it's it's fake in a sense that it was not the result of real savings and real productive capacity and accumulation of capital in a good sense, being thrifty, planning for the future, being responsible, etc. It's the result of artificial, fake money production. So it wrecks everything. It's like the road signs. If you modify the road signs on the traffic pattern, the car drivers or the truck drivers, they will make wrong decisions. That's the same in economy. So I've understood this. I mean, I already understood this many years ago, but it has become more clarified. I just go take care of my potatoes. We live in a society, in the whole world eventually, but especially in the Western world, where kind of everything is fake. I explain it's not. I explain why, because interest rates are being manipulated by the central banks. Prices are being manipulated by the state, which imposes regulations which artificially distort the prices as they ought to be if the economic agents were free to interact without being imposed regulation. So minimum wage, that's a distortion of the natural, here in a sense, result of the free market, of the natural exchange ratios between labor, skills, availability of labor, demand from the businesses. So that's a distortion. Modifying wages by decree of the state, it means to distort the economy, because it sends wrong signal. If a civil servant is worth $2,000 of economic productivity, here I simplify, the value of his work, given the market context, ought to be, let us imagine, $2,000, but if the state pays $2,500 because he wants loyalty or because they are corrupt, etc., you distort real value. So you pay $2,500 an employee who is only worth, if the market forces were at work properly, only worth $2,000. So you overpay. Or minimum wage, if you implement a law, $15 an hour, those whose productivity would only be $7 an hour in a free market settings, you are forced to overpay them. Which means that it's not the Keynesian view is now they will have more money to spend, so therefore it will increase the incentive for businesses to produce more, etc. That's the Keynesian logic. But actually, no, you do not pay the workers more. You prevent a lot of workers from being hired, because if as a business owner you are forced to pay $15 for people whose work is worth $7 or $8 an hour, instead of raising the wages, we simply not hire them, which will bring unemployment. And then the welfare state say, oh, capitalism creates poverty, we need regulations, we need redistribution, the rich, they steal your money. Yeah. So the interest rates are distorted. So the finance is being distorted. The economy is being distorted by state regulation. Language is being distorted and manipulated by journalists and intellectuals. Words are used meaninglessly. There is no connection between the meaning of word, namely the idea, the Denkbestimmung, as the German metaphysician would say. There is no more connection between the Denkbestimmung and the word. Words are supposed to reflect idea. That's the word is to the idea which it expresses what the body is to the soul. There has to be some sort of a connection, a harmony in a way. It's very difficult, because sometimes very complex ideas require a careful definition of word, and it's not possible to constantly define every word that are being used, but or sometimes the words can be ambiguous, there can be misunderstandings, etc., etc. But yeah, the language is being distorted, interest rates are distorted, the prices of wages and commodities through regulations, tariffs, etc., trade barriers, regulation, legislation, they are being distorted as well. Yeah. And in case it's not clear, the reason why, first I will go take care of my potatoes. The reason why I have been studying logic so thoroughly and making lectures and commentaries about logic is because, for me, it's self-evident, but metaphysics is the ground of everything else eventually, because the determinations of thought, they are found at all layers of nature, of the natural world: quality, quantity, measure, positive and negative, form and content, phenomena, appearance, Wirklichkeit, cause and effect, etc., etc., universal, particular, singular. So the logical categories are found throughout the natural world, but also throughout the social world, which is a byproduct, in a way, of the natural world. So for me, I've been trying to restore metaphysics, because in order to restore clarity, order, and truth eventually at all layers, first it has to become in thought. Think properly, then speak properly, and if thought and language are restored, then action can be correct, in a sense of virtuous, and then order, in the good, in the most noble sense, can be restored. But it begins by clarifying one's own thought. Yeah. And here I make a comment about ordinary people. What is frustrating when you are intelligent is that you see how the people get screwed up every time, but they don't see this because they do not have the time or the interest or the culture or the education or sometimes the intelligence to study really the theoretical reasons behind all the let us just take about economics, about the negative economic effects, the economic events and phenomena which affects them negatively. They experience inflation, difficult life condition, unemployment, or instability, etc. But they do not understand the causes which affects them negatively. So they get screwed every time without really understanding. And that's very frustrating when you are intelligent, because I understand, but I kind of fail to communicate. And first I have to understand thoroughly, but then it's difficult to convince people to take the time to read theoretical book, because when they are really living hardships, they are trying to survive on a day-to-day basis, well, or at least on a monthly basis. They have to pay their bills, to take care of their children, etc. So they do not have the time to retreat and think and reorganize their life individually and collectively, so as to prevent being screwed constantly. Yeah, so that's a little bit frustrating, but I'm working to improve. And here I will make a remark. Let us talk about the NBA, but it works for soccer as well and for most sports. Who knows basketball? Let us take the example of the NBA. Who knows basketball the most? Is it a student who has studied the theoretical aspect of basketball, for instance, physiology, the economics of basketball, the sociology of basketball players and basketball fans, who has studied the rules and the history of basketball, who knows all the theoretical aspect about basketball, but has never practiced himself or not at a very high level, because either he's disabled or because he was not very good or because he had health problems or whatever the reason. So someone who would know all the theoretical aspect but never really played basketball or soccer, or at least not at a very high level. That's the example of Jose Mourinho, the football manager. Mourinho is a genius of a manager, but he was not really a good player. Yeah. It happens a lot. That's just the typical example, but there are many great football managers and probably NBA managers as well, or any other sport, who were not really talented individually. They did not even were professionals. They played on an amateur level maybe, but they have become brilliant managers because they master the theoretical and psychological aspect of the job. So who is more competent, no, not competent, who is more knowledgeable? Is it the guy who possesses the theoretical aspect, or let us imagine another situation, a professional NBA player or soccer player who has been played at a very high level for his entire life and been very successful, but who has never had any sort of interest in his own sport? It happens a lot. I will take care of my eggs. I know it happens a lot among soccer players. There are many soccer players who they can be excellent players, great achievers, win a lot of trophies, be really competent, but they are not interested in soccer as such. For them, that's just a job, and I guess it's also the case for every other sport. So, who would know better? Is it the guy who has the empirical knowledge, the guy who has been a professional top player for his entire career for 15 years, 20 years, who has played at the highest level with the greatest players, who has been even one of the best maybe? Is it him, or is it the guy who never went on a playground, or at least not on a professional level, but who has studied all the theoretical aspect? I'm inclined toward the intellectual view that would be metaphysics. That would be Jose Mourinho would be the metaphysician of football or soccer, and the high top player who is very gifted on the field, but he doesn't care about any other aspect. That would be empiricism. And I'm on the side of the metaphysical intellectuals. But actually, the ideal, of course, would be to have both, either to be a theoretician with empirical experience, or a player who is intelligent enough to get interested in his sport and eventually to study the theoretical aspect. And here, that's the case of Guardiola, the Barcelona, Bayern and Manchester City football manager, Zinedine Zidane, and actually many others, Carlo Ancelotti, some of the greatest managers. They sometimes, it's not very often, but in football at least, but they used to be great football players. Johan Cruyff, it's usually it's kind of rare. Usually if we quantify most great football managers or soccer managers, they were not really great players. And most great players, they do not become great managers because their ego is kind of inflated because they have been great and excellent and they have been praised for their entire career. So they struggle to become competent managers because they do not understand why not all players are as talented as they are. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why sometimes it's difficult for former great players to become great managers, because they think that everyone is as talented as them, whereas it's not really the case. But there are exceptions like Guardiola, Ancelotti, Zinedine Zidane, and Johan Cruyff. I don't have all the names in mind, but there are examples of players who are really competent, of managers who are really excellent former players and who have become excellent managers. And Guardiola, I mean, I haven't followed soccer for many years, but Guardiola and Zidane, maybe they are the most shining examples. And I don't know enough empirically about the NBA, but I'm sure that there are also great basketball managers who used to be great basketball players, probably exists. So yeah, that's empiricism versus metaphysics. But actually I'm on the side of the metaphysicians. But the metaphysicians, they are intelligent enough to know that it's not one-sided, both sides have to be kind of reconciled. That's German metaphysics, so yeah. Locally grown, bought potatoes, onions, and eggs, and the beans, they are organic. And the orange juice, I think they come from Italy, but I pressed the orange juice myself. That's my German breakfast. I eat a lot in the morning to have energy for the rest of the day. And now I will talk about the empirical aspect of the economy. I have distributed, I do a little bit of virtue signaling. I have distributed hundreds of books over the month. Maybe more than 1,000, but hundreds of books. Because I had never heard about this anywhere. So either it's my idea or it's an idea which already exists, but that I have stumbled upon on my own. Or I go not necessarily daily, but at least 3 or 4 times a week in local shops, and I buy food stamps for organic food or sometimes organic supplies directly. For potential customers anonymously. I don't know who they are, and I don't say who I am. I don't give my name, and I don't tell them. I don't know who will receive the food stamps or the supplies, but organic food stamp for organic food, plus I give a book. Either it's a book about the pantry primer or making supplies or prepping, or about a diet or ecology, or sometimes about the social sciences, books like by Mises, Rothbard, Hayek, intelligent libertarian French authors like Monsieur Nemo or Monsieur Charles Gave. They borrowed all their ideas from Hayek, etc., and the libertarians, or like I said, ecological books to incentivize people who I know are usually not very educated. It's not necessarily completely their fault, because the French educational system, like all other or most other Western educational system, is broken for inherent structural reasons. But to encourage people who are relatively poor and who probably do not read a lot, and if they do, they probably do not read theoretical books or even practical books about ecology or diet. But my view is, if people who are really in financial difficulties because of inflation caused by the banking system and the state, yeah, if they really have economic struggles and I can afford to help them, that's the responsibility that the Roman and American view, Roman of ancient Rome, and before Rome became a socialist empire, it was an aristocratic republic where the nobility, the patricians, the Roman aristocracy had a moral duty to help the poor. It was not state redistribution, or at least not as developed as it would later be with the bread and circuses and the decadence of the empire. It was a moral obligation for also partly for a search for prestige and influence. There was, of course, the corruption aspect, but not in the negative sense, like someone who is genuinely corrupt, but corruption in the sense, of course, the rich people, they gave money to the poor, not out of the kindness of their heart, but because they sought influence. In a way, in this sense, it's kind of corrupt, but it's not really corrupt. But it's not Christian charity. That's well understood. Community organizing, in a way. It's not derogatory. Yeah, so the Romans used to do this, and then the Americans of the 19th century, as far as I know, based on Charles Murray, they did this as well. The wealthy, of course, because in the modern world, the rich, they still have a moral inclination towards helping the poor, but in the modern world, the rich are not rich. I'm slightly less poor than a lot of people, but I'm not rich. But when I speak about the rich here, I talk about the millionaires and the billionaires. They still have this moral inclination towards redistributing their unearned income. They stole the money from the poor. No, actually, no. They earn it on the free market because they offered goods and services which are valued by the customers. Contrarily to the state, who really steals the money. The billionaires, except if they are crony capitalists and if they use their influence to corrupt the politicians through lobbying and manipulation, etc. Otherwise, if they are rich, it's because they have provided goods and services which have been valued by customers. Yeah. So, so in the modern world, the rich, the oppressors of generations who have kept you down with their myth of equality. The rich, they still have this moral impulse to help the poor, but it is completely disconnected from community. They send money to poor children in Asia or in Africa, which is kind of morally good, but the moral duty of a rich person is first to take care of his own local community. Yeah, and they don't do this any longer. Poverty on a global scale is used as a moral weapon by rich white people against poor white people that they have some sort of a moral duty to help, but they don't perform this duty, and they guilt the poor working class by comparing the situation of the poor white workers in the West with the poverty in other parts of the world, to guilt the white workers and to shame them. You are privileged, etc. Look at the poor in Africa, in Asia. They are the ones in need of help. You are privileged. That's a class warfare tactics used by the white bourgeoisie. But it's kind of true, objectively. It's kind of true. If you are poor in a Western country, you are still very rich in comparison to the rest of the world. But intelligent economic analysis and sociological analysis would say that poverty is relative, because if you live in a wealthy society, there are requirements in terms of goods and services that you have to, not legally but you have to either morally or simply for convenience. If you live in a Western society, you have to have a car, you have to have equipment, washing machine, oven, etc. I don't have any of these things, but most people, they have to, and if they don't, they are some sort of outcasts. Yeah. So, objectively, if you are poor in a Western countries, you are poor relative to others. You are rich relative to most people in the rest of the world, but you are nonetheless poor because you need a whole lot of stuff which poorer people in other parts of the world don't need just to fit in within society. So poverty is partly relative. Yeah. And then psychologically, if you are poor, whatever your standard of living, you suffer because of envy and jealousy and comparison with those who are better off. Men, they don't want a pretty wife. They want a wife who is prettier than the wife of the neighbors. That's a joke, that's a joke. That's a joke. So, yeah, distributing books, intelligent books, to incentivize poor people to become smarter, more educated, and to improve their lifestyle, that's a good idea. Because it can help them in the short term if really they have really economic problems. That would be partly charity in a way, and it has to exist when people really are poor, because it's not, it can be partly of their fault, because if they are really irresponsible, but most of the time it's because of the economic policies wreck everything. So to help the poor, but while also giving them the incentive and the opportunity to improve themselves through study. I have done this consistently, and now it's 8 a.m. broadly. When I'm done eating my breakfast, I will go out and I will distribute a couple of books with food stamps of organic food. Yeah, and I encourage people who have the means to do it as well. If you pick up the cigarette butts and the trash in the street of your neighborhood, wherever you live, when you go out, if you help the poor intelligently, not by giving them money, but by giving them either incentive to improve themselves, or in the case of beggars, tasks to perform if they are interested and if they are willing, you will gain reputation in your local community, and status and influence, and you will be considered a good person. Sometimes I suspect that God might be a schemer, because he's very intelligent and he knows that. That's my personal case. I just want to feel good about myself, and he tricks me, he forces me unconsciously to do a whole lot of good actions for others, because I want to feel good about myself. That's a trick. You make people feel bad, and then they want to feel good, and if they are intelligent, they know that they have to do good to others to be worthy of feeling good about themselves. That's the cunning of reason. But when I have the illusion, at least, that I can help others and enlighten them and guide them towards improvement, it makes me feel good. Yeah. Organic apple. I will conclude with a note on wisdom. interacting with empirical people has really helped me become more humble, sometimes in a good sense, because I have become more aware of my sociological determinisms, and I'm not a working class person, obviously, but I'm not from a high status family in terms of sociology, but my intelligence and my cultural, here I will quote Bourdieu, the French sociologist, well, my cultural capital, I do not have a lot of economic capital. I mean, I have acquired through practicing philosophy, my way, I guess, but I am not economically very wealthy. I do not have a lot of social capital. I think that social capital is that the ability to influence the network, basically, the friends or the people that you can network with. I have zero social capital. I do not have a lot of economic capital, but I have a cultural capital because I have a high intelligence and a very high culture. And in this sense, I do not belong to the working class, but interacting with people of a broad variety of social classes, overwhelmingly white, but I have interacted with non-whites as well, of different social classes as well, has really helped me become more humble most of the time. Sometimes I still have outbursts of arrogance, but because really there are people who really have a difficult life, but also some sort of a rewarding life, but they are really I become aware that I am privileged in terms of access to culture, and yeah. And I have tried, and I'm still trying, and I will keep trying and eventually succeeding in sharing my culture yeah. Yeah. Because here I will stop the video at 1 hour or before, but I will make a remark. I have been deceived, and I'm still often being deceived by my high intelligence in comparison with most people, because I just take an example. When I left high school at the age of 16, or just when I turned 17, as a high school dropout, it took me 4 years to start reading books again. I did not used to read books, actually, except those who were mandatory in the school curriculum, but I was not a great reader, except a few novels like Harry Potter, etc., but I was not a great reader. So it took me 4 years after leaving high school to start reading independently and for the sake of knowledge and not entertainment. And I have realized, without ever talking about this to anyone, that actually most people who are much less intelligent quantitatively, when they leave high school or college even, or the school system, a lot of people, they do not read books at all, or very rarely, for the rest of their life. For them, book reading is a mandatory, compulsory task required in school once they go out of school, even if they become very successful entrepreneurs, businessmen, high graded civil servants, successful individual freelance workers, etc. Usually these people, they have to read the psychologist or the freelance marketing coaching people or whatever they have to read to keep updates about the evolution of their job. So these people usually they read a lot, but they read only within their specific field. People who read just because it's interesting and who wants to read about eventually all topics just to acquire culture because this is interesting and this is elevating for the soul and the spirit, very few people do this. Very few people acquire a classical education on their own. I have been buying for years most of the classics of the Western tradition. Of course, I do not have the time to read them, but just for me, if when you grow up, you have to have all the classics in your library. So I come from a low middle class background and even working class if we go back in time, but my mindset is actually aristocratic. Yeah. I read my way to the top. And I know, because I have a vague historical culture, that people from lower social strata, lower social background, but who rise through intelligence and culture, they can be dangerous for the people in charge because they have no loyalty toward the high classes and they are intelligent independently of the ideology of the dominant elites. This is what makes great revolutionaries. And I know enough about the revolutionaries in the history of the West. I try to pick the best ones, because Jefferson was not alone. I tried to pick the best because among all the attempted and sometimes successful politically, but not necessarily in other fields, among all the revolutions which have agitated the history of the Western world, the American Revolution is the best in terms of results and stability. Yeah, I thought about this because the German revolutionary of the 16th century in the realm of theology, I tend to agree with a lot of what he says, but it has brought about really disturbing consequences in the 17th century, in the 16th and 17th century, but on a longer term it has been a great success. Cromwell, well, I'm not knowledgeable enough about the history of England, but it has been disturbing or disrupting as well. But yeah, the French, it has been disrupting on the short term and destructive on the long term. The Americans, a little bit of disruption, but tremendous success on the longer term. And the Germans of the 20th century, or the Italians, but the Germans predominantly, well, Jefferson is moderate, universal, and that's probably the wisest. I'm not talking about him as an individual, although he was probably very wise, but what he embodies, this is really the best in the sense of wisest, moderate in a good sense. Yeah. Now I will distribute my ecological books.